12 species had tried to survive Verdaxis. 7. 12 species had failed. Their bones still rotted beneath the endless green canopy, picked clean by things that had no names in any civilized language. Danny Reeves listened to this information with his hands bound behind his back, standing in a courtroom that floated among the stars. The Galactic Tribunal had gathered to watch his sentencing. Hundreds of alien faces staring down at the small human who had dared to strike an ambassador. High Collector Sithis stood across the chamber, his insectoid body towering 3 meters tall. His compound eyes reflected Danny's image 1,000 times over. The bruise on his thorax, where Danny's fist had connected, had already healed. But his pride had not. "The human attacked me without provocation," Sithis declared, his voice clicking and buzzing through the translator. "I demand the ancient punishment. Exile to the devourer world." Whispers filled the courtroom. Even the judges shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Danny's captain, an elderly Rillian named Grandmother Pesk, rose from a gallery. Her gray fur bristled with distress. "Honor Tribunal, this is excessive. The human acted in defense of my cargo after the ambassador's guards attempted a legal seizure. Surely a fine, perhaps imprisonment." Verdaxis 7, Sithis interrupted. "Nothing less." The head judge, a being made of crystalline structures that chimed when it moved, leaned forward. "High Collector, you understand that exile to the devourer world is a death sentence. Average survival time is 11 hours. No member of a spacefaring species has ever lasted longer than 19. I'm aware." Sithis's mandibles clicked in what passed for a smile among his kind. "That is rather the point." Danny finally spoke. His voice was calm, almost curious. "What's the weather like down there?" The courtroom fell silent. The judges stared. Even Sithis seemed confused by the question. "Hot," the crystalline judge answered after a moment. "Humid. The atmosphere is breathable but thick with spores." "Why do you ask?" Danny shrugged, as much as his restraints allowed. "Just wondering if I should take a jacket." Grandmother Pesk made a sound of distress. Danny caught her eye and smiled, trying to reassure her. It did not work. The sentence was passed. Exile to Verdaxis 7, effective immediately. No supplies, no weapons, no communication equipment. Danny would be dropped from orbit in a survival pod with nothing but his clothes and whatever mercy the universe saw fit to provide as the guards led him away. Danny looked back at his crew one last time. Grandmother Pesk was weeping openly. His crewmates stood in shock, unable to believe what was happening. He wanted to tell them not to worry. He wanted to explain. But there was no time, and they would not have believed him anyway. The guards processed him quickly. They took his boots, his belt, anything that might give him an advantage. One guard, a young officer with scales the color of rust, hesitated as he removed Danny's personal effects. He glanced around, then pressed something small and cold into Danny's palm. A knife. Barely longer than Danny's finger, but sharp. "I am sorry," the young officer whispered. "This sentence is wrong." Danny nodded his thanks and hid the blade in his waistband before anyone else could see. The survival pod was barely large enough to hold him. As Danny strapped himself in, he thought about his grandmother. Not Grandmother Pesk, though he loved her dearly. His real grandmother, the woman who had raised him in the green hell of the Amazon basin after his parents died. She had taught him to read the jungle like a book. She had shown him which plants healed and which ones killed. She had made him understand that the forest was not evil, just indifferent. It did not care if you lived or died. Your survival was your own responsibility. "The jungle does not hate you," she used to say. "It simply does not notice you. So you must make it notice. You must become something it cannot ignore." Danny had been 7 years old when a jaguar stalked their camp for 3 days. His grandmother had tracked it, studied it, and finally faced it down with nothing but a machete and her own stubborn refusal to be prey. The jaguar had left. It had recognized something in her eyes that made it decide she was not worth the trouble. Danny had inherited those eyes. The pod launched. Through the tiny viewport, Danny watched Station Meridian shrink to a point of light. Below him, Verdaxis 7 grew larger, A marble of impossible green swirled with clouds that looked like infection spreading across skin. The Devourer World .17 intelligent species had walked beneath that canopy. 17 species had fed the endless hunger of the jungle. Scientists, soldiers, explorers, they had all entered with confidence in technology and numbers. None of it had mattered, but none of them had been human. None of them had grown up in a place where the trees themselves could kill, where the rivers held death in every shadow, where survival meant becoming part of the green world rather than fighting against it. The pod hit atmosphere. Fire bloomed across the viewport as friction heated the hull. Danny closed his eyes and remembered the smell of rain on jungle leaves, the sound of howler monkeys at dawn, the feel of humid air filling his lungs like warm water. He had been born in a jungle. He had been raised in a jungle, and now he was coming home. The canopy rushed up to meet him, an ocean of green teeth ready to swallow him whole. Danny Reeves smiled. The pod crashed through branches thick as starship hulls and came to rest in a tangle of vines that pulsed with bioluminescent veins. Danny hung upside down, blood rushing to his head, listening to the jungle wake up around him. Something was already coming to investigate. He cut himself free with the small knife and dropped to the forest floor, landing in a crouch. The ground was soft, covered in centuries of rotting vegetation that squelched beneath his bare feet. The air hit his lungs like a wet blanket, thick with moisture and spores that made his eyes water immediately. Danny did not move. He did not breathe. He waited that a vine slithered past his ankle, its surface warm to the touch. It was hunting for body heat, he realized. Hunting for him. He stayed perfectly still until it lost interest and moved on, seeking easier prey. Lesson 1. Heat was a weakness here. He moved slowly through the undergrowth, testing each step before committing his weight. The plants here were not passive. They responded to touch, to movement, to the vibrations of footsteps. He watched a small creature, something like a rat with too many eyes, brush against a fern. The fern snapped shut around it instantly, thorns punching through its body as it screamed. Lesson 2. Nothing here was safe to touch. Danny found a pool of water that looked clear and inviting. He picked up a stick and dipped it in. When he pulled it out, the end had dissolved to nothing, eaten away by something in the liquid. The pool itself rippled, disappointed, settling back to wait for less cautious prey. Lesson 3. Nothing here was what it seemed. By the time the first sun began to set, Danny had covered perhaps 200 meters. Most species would have panicked at such slow progress. Most species would have run, desperate to find shelter before darkness fell. Danny was not most species. He found a tree that smelled different from the others, its bark giving off a sharp copper scent that made his nose wrinkle. The heat-hunting vines avoided it. The carnivorous ferns grew sparse around its trunk. Even the insects gave it space. This tree was poison to the jungle, which meant it was safety for him. He climbed carefully, testing each branch, learning the tree's structure by touch and instinct. 30 meters up, he found a natural platform where several branches met. He wedged himself into the space and began pulling vines from surrounding trees, testing each one on insects first to see which were dangerous. Some vines burned, some paralyzed, but some were just vines, and those he wove into a crude nest that would hold his weight through the night. As darkness fell, the jungle transformed. Bioluminescence bloomed everywhere, painting the world in shades of blue and green and purple. It was beautiful, Danny thought. Terrifying, but beautiful. Something massive moved through the undergrowth far below. Danny watched its silhouette pass between glowing trees, a shadow that stretched 20 meters from end to end. It moved with the patience of a predator that had never known failure. It moved like something that had eaten everything this world had ever produced, the moss serpent. He did not know its name yet, but he knew what it was. Every ecosystem had an apex predator. This was the thing that sat at the top of the devourer world's food chain, and it had caught his scent. Danny smiled in the darkness. Let it come. Let it learn. Far above the jungle, on Station Meridian, Grandmother Pesk sat at her cabin aboard the wandering moth, unable to sleep. She had accessed the old Earth databases, searching for anything that might help her understand what Danny was facing. What she found made her blood run cold. Humans had evolved on a world called Earth, a planet so dangerous that 3/4 of its surface was covered in liquid that could kill most species within minutes. Its jungles have been some of the deadliest environments in the known galaxy, filled with diseases and predators and parasites that defied belief. And humans had not just survived there. They had thrived. They had climbed to the top of their world's food chain through nothing but endurance and adaptability and a stubborn refusal to die. The Amazon, the Congo, the jungles of Southeast Asia. Humans had conquered them all. Grandmother Pesk pulled up Danny's personnel file. Born in Brazil, raised in the Amazon basin. Grandmother deceased, no other family listed. He had joined a merchant crew at 16 and never looked back. She had always wondered why Danny seemed so comfortable in dangerous situations. Why he never panicked when things went wrong. Why he smiled at problems that made other species weep with fear. Now she understood. The tribunal had not sentenced Danny Reeves to death. They had sent him home. In the jungle below, Danny listened to the moss serpent circle his tree for the third time. It could smell him. It knew he was there, but it could not reach him, not in this tree that poisoned everything it touched. Tomorrow, he would need to find food, water. He would need to learn this jungle's rules, its patterns, its weaknesses. Tonight he would rest, and he would plan. The moss serpent eventually moved on, seeking easier prey. Danny watched it go, memorizing its movement patterns, noting how it hunted, where it paused, what it avoided. His grandmother had taught him that knowledge was the greatest weapon. Understanding was worth more than any blade. Verdaxis, 7 had broken 12 species. Danny intended to be the 13th, the one who broke it back. 3 suns rose over Verdaxis, 7, each one adding heat to a world that already felt like the inside of a mouth. Danny descended from his tree as the first light touched the canopy. His body aching from a night spent wedged between branches. He had work to do. The first task was camouflage. The heat-hunting vines had nearly found him twice during the night, drawn by the warmth of his body. Danny gathered mud from beneath the copperbark tree, mixing it with crushed leaves that gave off a bitter smell. He covered himself head to toe, masking his temperature signature and his scent. The vines slithered past without interest. He had become invisible. The second task was water. He could not survive long without it, but every water source he had found was either acidic or alive. Danny watched the local animals, the ones that survived here, and noticed they drank from certain plants. Thick stalks that collected morning dew in cup-shaped leaves. The water that was clean, he drank carefully, rationing himself, never taking more than he needed. The third task was food. Danny found fruit growing on a vine that nothing else would touch. He tested it carefully, rubbing a small piece on his skin, then on his lips, then holding a tiny bit on his tongue. No warning, no namnis, no death. He ate. The fruit tasted like nothing, bland and watery, but it filled his stomach. He understood why the animals avoided it. It offered no nutrition worth the effort. But Danny was not looking for a feast. He was looking to survive. By midday, he had established a pattern. Move slowly. Watch everything. Trust nothing. The jungle operated on rules, and Danny was learning them one by one. The moss serpent found him again on the second afternoon. Danny had been studying a clearing where several game trails met, looking for patterns in the animal movements. He felt the serpent before he saw it. A change in the air, a sudden silence from the insects and birds that filled the canopy. He turned slowly. It was enormous. 12 meters of scaled muscle, its body thick as a cargo container, its head crowned with heat-sensing pits that glowed faintly red. 4 jaws nested inside each other, ready to unhinge and swallow prey, twice Danny's size. It watched him. He watched it back. Every instinct screamed at Danny to run. Every cell in his body demanded flight. But his grandmother's voice spoke louder than instinct. Running was death. Running meant you were prey. Danny stood his ground. The moss serpent circled him slowly, tasting his scent with a forked tongue the length of his arm. It had never encountered anything like him before. Warm-blooded prey that did not flee. A creature that smelled of fear but showed none. Confusion. Danny could see it in the serpent's movements. This did not match its understanding of how the world worked. After 5 minutes that felt like 5 hours, the serpent moved on. It did not attack. It did not understand him yet, and predators rarely attacked what they did not understand. Danny exhaled slowly and resumed his observations. That night, he found the serpent's den at a cave system beneath a rocky outcrop, its entrance worn smooth by countless years of massive coils sliding in and out. Bones littered the ground around it, the remains of every species that had tried to survive this world. Danny counted 17 distinct types of skeleton, some with technology still fused to their remains. They had all died here. Fed to the apex predator of the devourer world, Danny studied the bones for a long time. Scientists with scanning equipment, soldiers with weapons, explorers with survival gear better than anything Danny possessed. None of it had saved them, but he understood why. They had all tried to hide from the jungle. They had all tried to escape it, to outlast it, to shield themselves from its hunger. They had built shelters and waited for rescue that never came. They had treated this world as an enemy to be endured. Danny's grandmother would have laughed at them. You did not hide from the jungle. You did not run from it. You became part of it. You learned its rhythms and made them your own. You became something the jungle could not ignore, could not dismiss, could not simply digest and forget. You became an apex predator yourself. Danny began to plan. Not an escape, not survival. Something more. He gathered materials over the next 2 days. Sharp stones, strong vines, branches from the copperbark tree that would hold an edge. He built a spear first, then a shorter blade for close work. He wove a net from vines that burned whatever touched them. The moss serpent continued to hunt him, appearing at the edges of his vision, circling his camps at night. It was patient. It had killed everything this world had ever produced. It could wait, but Danny was patient too. On the 5th day, he set his trap. A pit covered with leaves, lined with sharpened stakes coated in sap from a plant that caused muscle paralysis. He baited it with fruit and waited. The serpent did not fall for it. Of course it did not. It was not stupid, but it came close enough to investigate, and that was all Danny needed. He triggered the secondary trap. A weighted net dropped from above, tangling around the serpent's sensing pits. It thrashed, confused, unable to see or smell for critical seconds. Danny moved. His spear found a soft tissue beneath the serpent's jaw, driving deep before the creature could recover. Not a killing blow. Danny did not want to kill it. He wanted to hurt it. He wanted it to remember. The serpent ripped free of the net and fled into the jungle, black blood dripping from its wound. For the first time in its evolutionary history, the moss serpent had felt pain from something it was hunting. For the first time, it had encountered prey that fought back. Danny watched it go, his heart pounding, his hands shaking with exhaustion and fear and triumph. The hunt had begun. The wound Danny had given the moss serpent should have been a minor inconvenience. A creature that size, with regenerative abilities evolved over millions of years, should have healed within days and returned to hunting with renewed fury. Instead, the serpent began to avoid Danny. That he noticed it on the 6th day, when he deliberately crossed through the creature's territory. The usual signs of its presence were absent. No fresh trails, no territorial markings, no distant movement through the undergrowth. The apex predator of Verdaxis, 7 had retreated from a single human. Danny did not let it rest. He tracked the serpent through the jungle, following the faint traces of black blood it had left behind. Every time it settled in a new location, Danny found it. Every time it tried to hunt, Danny was there first, fouling its ambush sites with the copperbark tree's toxic sap, driving away its prey before it could strike. He did not attack again. He did not need to. He was teaching it. On the 7th day, Danny collapsed the entrance to the serpent's new den with a carefully placed rock slide. On the 8th, he poisoned its water source with plants that caused painful but temporary illness. On the 9th, he spent the entire day simply following it, making no attempt to hide, letting the creature know that wherever it went, he would be there. The jungle noticed. Other predators began to give Danny wider berth. A pack of hunters, dog-sized creatures with 6 legs, and too many teeth, started following him at a distance. At first, Danny thought they were waiting to attack. Then he realized the truth. They were scavengers. They followed apex predators, feeding on the scraps left behind. And now they were following him. Danny began sharing his kills with them. Small animals he caught in snares. Insects he collected from rotting logs. Nothing much, but enough to establish a relationship. The pack grew bolder, coming closer each day, until they slept at the edge of his camps and warned him with their barking when danger approached. He called them the kids. On the 10th day, the moss serpent made its decision. Danny was walking through a clearing when he felt the familiar pressure of its presence. He turned to find it watching him from the tree line, its wounded sensing pits scarred over, but still functional. They stared at each other across 20 meters of open ground. The serpent could have attacked. It was faster than Danny, stronger than Danny, more deadly than anything else on this world. One strike, and it would be over. It did not attack. Slowly, deliberately, the moss serpent lowered its head. Then it turned and slithered away, disappearing into the deep jungle. It did not look back. Danny stood alone in the clearing, breathing hard, trying to understand what had just happened. The serpent had not fled in fear. It had not retreated from injury. It had submitted. It had recognized Danny as something greater than itself, something it could not defeat, and it had chosen to leave rather than continue a fight it could not win. For 10,000 years, that creature's ancestors had ruled this jungle. Nothing had challenged them. Nothing had survived long enough to try. Until now, Danny walked to the serpent's abandoned den and stood among the bones of 17 species. Scientists, soldiers, explorers, all dead, all forgotten. That he did not feel triumphant. He felt tired and sad and very far from home. But he also felt something else. Something he had not expected to feel on a death world at the edge of known space, that he felt like he belonged. Far above, on Station Meridian, the viewing numbers for Danny's exile feed had reached levels that broke the network's servers. Billions of beings across the galaxy were watching a single human do the impossible. Survive a world that killed everything. High Collector Sithis demanded the feed be terminated. The tribunal refused. This was history. This was unprecedented. This was the most watched broadcast in galactic history, and no one was going to turn it off. Grandmother Pesk watched from the bridge of the wandering moth, tears streaming down her gray fur. 11 days. Danny had survived 11 days on a world that killed in hours. And he was not just surviving anymore, that he was thriving. She made a decision. The tribunal would not help her. The authorities would not intervene. But she had friends in low places, contact in the smuggling networks that operated beyond the law. She began making calls that in the jungle below. Danny sat by a waterfall he had discovered, a rare safe zone where the water was clean and predators came to drink in uneasy peace. The kids sprawled around him, their six-legged bodies twitching in sleep. Tomorrow, he would begin building something permanent. A shelter, a base, a home. The jungle had tried to kill him. The jungle had thrown its worst at him, its deadliest predator, its most hostile environment, and Danny had not just survived, he had won. But victory meant nothing if he could not hold what he had gained. The serpent might be gone, but Verdaxis, 7, still had teeth. The plants still hunted. The water still waited. Every moment of every day was a battle for survival. Danny looked up at the 3 moons rising over the canopy, their light painting the jungle in shades of silver and blue. Somewhere up there, people thought he was dead. Somewhere up there, High Collector Sithis was celebrating his victory over the human who had embarrassed him. Danny smiled. The game was not over yet. Danny woke on the 12th morning to the sound of rain drumming against leaves the size of shuttle wings. The kids pressed closer around him, seeking warmth, their 6 legs tangled together in a pile of fur and muscle. He had built his shelter in the moss serpent's old den, reinforcing the cave entrance with timber from the copperbark trees. Nothing could approach without triggering the network of vines and bones that served as his alarm system. For the first time since landing on this world, Danny slept through entire nights without waking. The rain continued for 3 days. Danny spent the time improving his tools, weaving stronger nets, sharpening his blades on stones he had collected from the river. He also began something new, a garden. The seeds came from the bland fruit that had sustained him through his first weeks. The soil came from the valley floor, rich with nutrients from centuries of decomposition. Danny cleared a small patch near his cave, pulling out the dangerous plants by their roots, poisoning the ground against the crawling vines with sap from his copperbark allies. He planted his seeds and waited. The galaxy had never seen what happened next on Station Meridian. Scientists argued about what they were witnessing. Humans were not supposed to be able to do this. They were a young species, barely capable of interstellar travel, unremarkable in every measurable way. They had no natural weapons, no armor, no special abilities that would explain how Danny Reeves had survived 2 weeks on a world that killed in hours. But the data was undeniable. The human was not just surviving. He was farming. Grandmother Pesk had assembled a crew. 3 smugglers with a ship fast enough to outrun tribunal patrols, willing to break a dozen laws for the right price. She had sold everything she owned to pay them, everything except the wandering moth itself. Danny was worth in the jungle below. Danny explored further from his base each day. He mapped the terrain, marking dangerous areas and safe paths. He found a grove where bioluminescent flowers bloomed at night, filling the air with soft light and a sweet scent that attracted no predators. He discovered hot springs fed by volcanic activity deep underground, pools warm enough to bathe in without risk. The jungle was not just death. It was life too, if you knew where to look. The kids had grown bold enough to hunt alongside him now. They flushed prey from hiding spots, and Danny brought it down with his spear. They worked as a team, predator and partner, the same relationship his ancestors had forged with wolves thousands of years ago. One evening, as Danny sat by his waterfall watching the 3 moons rise, he noticed movement in the shadows. Large movement, familiar movement. The moss serpent had returned. Danny reached for his spear, but the serpent made no aggressive moves. It slithered to the water's edge, barely 30 meters from where Danny sat, and lowered its massive head to drink. The kids growled, but did not attack. They sensed something Danny was only beginning to understand. The serpent was not hunting. It was visiting. Night after night, it returned. Always to the same spot, by the waterfall. Always to drink in peace while Danny watched from a safe distance. It never approached him. It never threatened. It simply existed in the same space, acknowledging his presence, accepting his right to be there. Danny began leaving food for it. Small kills, nothing he needed, placed on a rock by the water's edge. The serpent ate them without hesitation. On the 15th day, Danny walked to within 10 meters of the moss serpent while it rested. Its sensing pitch tracked him, but it did not move. He reached out slowly, carefully, and placed his hand on its scales. The creature that had killed 17 intelligent species allowed a human to touch it. Danny laughed. He could not help it. The absurdity of the situation, the impossibility of everything that had happened, overwhelmed him. He stood in the deadliest jungle in the known galaxy, his hand on the head of its apex predator, laughing like a child. The serpent made a sound, a low rumble that vibrated through Danny's bones. He chose to believe it was laughing too. Far above, Grandmother Pesk's smuggler ship entered the Verdaxis system. They had 3 days before tribunal patrols would detect them. 3 days to land, find Danny, and escape before the authorities arrived. She watched the planet grow larger in the view screen, its green surface hiding the most dangerous ecosystem in the galaxy. Somewhere down there, her boy was waiting. She did not know about the garden. She did not know about the serpent. She did not know that Danny had stopped thinking of rescue weeks ago. Verdaxis 7 was not his prison anymore. IT was his home, and he had only begun to understand what that meant. 3 ships descended through the clouds of Verdaxis 7 on the morning of the 17th day. The first was a battered smuggler vessel carrying Grandmother Pesk and her hired crew. The second was a tribunal enforcement cruiser, dispatched to resolve the situation permanently. The third was the golden yacht of High Collector Sithis himself, who had come to watch the human finally die. Danny heard them coming from kilometers away. The jungle had taught him to listen, and the roar of engines was impossible to miss. He gathered his weapons, called the kids to his side, and walked to the only clearing large enough to serve as a landing zone that he was not hiding anymore. The ships landed in a rough triangle, their engines scorching the vegetation and filling the air with smoke. Hatches opened and beings spilled out. Grandmother Pesk rushed forward, her gray fur matted with tears, her arms reaching for the boy she had thought lost forever. Danny embraced her. He had not realized how much he missed her until that moment. The tribunal officers formed a line, their weapons raised but uncertain. They had watched the broadcasts. They had seen what this human had done to the apex predator of a death world. Their orders said to eliminate him, but their instincts said something else entirely. High Collector Sithis emerged from his yacht, his compound eyes scanning the clearing until they found Danny. Rage twisted his insectoid features. The human was supposed to be dead. The human was supposed to have been digested weeks ago, another set of bones in the endless graveyard of the Devourer world. Instead, he stood there wearing armor made from serpent hide, carrying weapons carved from bone, surrounded by alien predators that followed him like dogs followed their masters. "Kill him," Sithis commanded. The tribunal officers did not move. "I gave you an order. Kill the human." Still, they did not move. Something in Danny's eyes held them frozen. Something ancient and primal. Something their ancestors had learned to fear before they ever reached the stars. Grandmother Pesk stepped forward, placing herself between Danny and the officers. "I invoke trial by survival. The ancient law states that any condemned being who survives their sentence is pardoned. This human has survived 17 days on Verdaxis 7. 17 days on a world that kills in hours. By every legal standard in the Galactic Covenant, he is free." Sithis' mandibles clicked with fury. That law was never meant to apply here. No one survives the Devourer world. Someone did. Danny's voice was calm, almost gentle. "Maybe your laws need updating." Sithis drew a weapon from his robes, a plasma pistol that hummed with deadly energy. "I will not be humiliated by some soft-skinned primitive from a backwater planet. I will end this myself." Danny did not move. He did not need to. The jungle moved for him. The maw serpent exploded from the undergrowth. 12 meters of armored fury aimed directly at the creature threatening its territory. Sithis had time to scream once before the serpent's jaws closed around him, lifting him off the ground and shaking him like a toy. Danny raised his hand. "Enough." The serpent stopped. It held Sithis in its jaws, alive but paralyzed with terror, and looked at Danny with something that might have been confusion. "Let him go." The serpent opened its mouth. Sithis fell to the ground, covered in saliva and terror, his weapon lost somewhere in the jungle. He scrambled backward, his compound eyes fixed on a monster that had nearly killed him. "This is my world now," Danny said quietly. "The jungle and everything in it answers to me. You can kill me if you want. Your officers can shoot me where I stand. But you will never leave this planet alive. The serpent will find you. The jungle will find you. And they will not be as merciful as I am." Sithis stared at him. The tribunal officers stared at him. Even Grandmother Pesk stared at him, seeing something in her boy that she had never noticed before. Danny smiled, and it was not a kind smile. "Go home, High Collector. Tell everyone what you saw here. Tell them that humanity sent one man to the deadliest world in the galaxy, and he conquered it in 17 days. Tell them that the next time they want to exile a human, they should choose somewhere actually dangerous." Sithis fled. His officers helped him back to his yacht, and the golden ship lifted off within minutes, racing for orbit as if the jungle itself was chasing them. The tribunal officers followed without a word. They had seen enough. Their report would shake the foundations of galactic civilization, but that was a problem for another day. Only Grandmother Pesk remained. "Come home," she said, her voice breaking. "Please, Danny, come back to the ship. Come back to space." Danny looked at the jungle around him. The kid sat at his feet, panting happily. The maw serpent had retreated to the tree line, watching over its partner like a guardian spirit. In the distance, his garden was growing, the first crops beginning to push through the soil. "I am home," he said, "but I could use some company, and some better tools, and maybe some seeds that actually taste like something." Grandmother Pesk laughed through her tears. You want to stay here? On the death world. It is not a death world. Not anymore. Danny put his arm around her shoulders and guided her toward his cave. Come on, let me show you what I have built. Let me show you what this place can become. 6 months later, the first permanent human settlement was established on Verdaxis 7. Danny led the colonists himself, teaching them to read the jungle's patterns, to respect its rules, to become part of its ecosystem rather than fighting against it. The galactic community watched in horror and fascination as humanity did what it had always done. It took the deadliest environment imaginable and made it home. The jungle did not break Danny Reeves. Danny Reeves taught the jungle to love him. And the galaxy learned to fear what humanity could do when it stopped running and started fighting back.